The moving truck rumbled away, leaving Sarah standing alone in the driveway. The old house at the end of Briar Lane was hers now. Sunlight glinted off its dusty windows, and the porch sagged with age. It was supposed to be her dream home, a fresh start in a quiet town. But as Sarah turned the key in the lock, a shiver ran down her spine. The house felt cold, unwelcoming. Locals had warned her about the house. They whispered tales of a haunting, of a family that had vanished within its walls. Sarah had dismissed their stories as folklore, the ramblings of bored townspeople. She didn't believe in ghosts. She believed in logic, in reason. But as the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the overgrown lawn, a flicker of doubt crept into her mind. Sarah shook off the feeling and stepped inside. The air was thick with the scent of dust and decay. She walked through the darkened rooms, her footsteps echoing in the silence. The house felt empty, but not in the way a vacant house should. It felt like something was watching her, lurking just out of sight. Despite the unsettling atmosphere, Sarah was determined to make the house her own. She lit a fire in the old fireplace, hoping to chase away the chill that seemed to cling to the very walls. As the flames crackled and danced, casting a warm glow on the surrounding furniture, Sarah allowed herself a small smile. Maybe the locals were wrong. Maybe this house held nothing but forgotten memories and the promise of a new beginning. The first few days in the house were uneventful. Sarah busied herself with unpacking boxes and settling into her new surroundings. She explored the town, met some of the locals, and tried to ignore the occasional strange noises that emanated from the old house. There was a creak on the stairs, a groan from the attic, the sound of the wind whistling through a crack in the window pane. All easily explained away, Sarah told herself. Just an old house finding its voice again. One evening, as Sarah was preparing dinner in the dusty kitchen, she heard it for the first time. A faint scratching sound coming from behind the wall in her bedroom. It was soft, almost imperceptible, but it sent a shiver down her spine. She paused, listening intently, but the sound had stopped. Had she imagined it? Probably just a mouse, she muttered to herself, trying to sound unconcerned. But the memory of the scratching lingered in the back of her mind, a tiny seed of unease taking root. That night, lying in bed, Sarah found it difficult to fall asleep. The silence of the old house was broken only by the occasional creak and groan of its aging timbers. Every time she thought she was drifting off, the faintest scratching sound would jolt her back awake. It seemed to be coming from the same spot behind the wall, a steady, rhythmic scraping that set her teeth on edge. As the days turned into nights, the scratching sound behind Sarah's bedroom wall grew louder, more insistent. It started subtly, a gentle rasp against the plaster. But each night it intensified, becoming a persistent grating noise that seemed to vibrate through the very bones of the old house. It was driving Sarah to the brink of madness. She tried to ignore it, to convince herself it was nothing more than a pesky rodent. She placed traps, sealed up any cracks or holes she could find, and even resorted to banging on the wall in an attempt to scare whatever was behind it away. But the scratching persisted, relentless and unnerving. Sleep became a distant memory. Sarah would lie awake for hours, listening to the incessant scratching, her nerves stretched taut with anxiety and fear. The sound seemed to seep into her dreams, transforming into horrific nightmares that left her gasping for breath and drenched in a cold sweat. The once charming quirks of the old house now filled her with dread. Every creaking floorboard, every rustling curtain sent her heart racing. The house felt different now, heavier, as if it were closing in around her. Section 4. Shadows and Doubts. The scratching was no longer the only sound that haunted Sarah's nights. Whispers seemed to emanate from the walls, faint and indistinct at first, but growing steadily louder. They swirled around her as she lay in bed, disembodied voices murmuring her name, beckoning her closer. Fear was a constant companion now, a suffocating presence that followed her from room to room. Shadows seemed to dance at the edge of her vision, and every time she turned around, she expected to see something sinister lurking just out of sight. One night, as Sarah lay in bed, paralyzed by fear, she heard a distinct voice whisper her name. It was close, too close, as if someone was standing right beside her bed. She bolted upright, her heart pounding in her chest, but the room was empty. The whispering had stopped, but the feeling of an unseen presence lingered in the air. Sarah was no longer sure what was real and what was a figment of her sleep-deprived imagination. Was she losing her mind? Or was there truly something sinister lurking within the walls of the old house on Briar Lane? Section 5. A Dream of Despair. Exhausted but unable to find peace in her own home, Sarah sought refuge in troubled sleep. One night, a vivid nightmare seized her. She dreamt of a woman with hollow eyes and tangled hair, trapped behind the wall where the scratching originated. The woman's pale hand, skeletal and desperate, reached out from a small opening, her fingers scraping against the plaster. "Help me," the woman whispered, her voice a dry, raspy plea. "Set me free." Sarah recoiled in terror. The woman's eyes, filled with an unspeakable sadness and longing, bored into her soul. She tried to turn away, but the woman's grip on her arm tightened, her touch icy cold. "You are the only one who can hear me," the woman rasped, her voice filled with urgency. "You are the only one who can help." Sarah woke with a gasp, her heart racing, the echo of the woman's desperate plea ringing in her ears. Sunlight streamed through the window, chasing away the remnants of the nightmare, but the terror lingered. It felt too real to be just a dream. The scratching behind the wall seemed louder now, more insistent, as if the woman from her nightmare were trying to claw her way out. Sarah knew she couldn't ignore it any longer. She had to find out what was behind that wall, even if it terrified her.